nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Farage, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use by Ukraine.
Only farms over the value of £3 million will be affected by the changes.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. What is going on with Reform UK? There is a lot going on, certainly. Is it terminal or is this just a bit of a blip? Certainly Nigel Farage is under pressure because one of his MPs, Rupert Lowe, is under pressure too. He's been reported to police because of alleged threats to the chairman, Zia Youssef. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about what's happening in Ukraine with Russia, with Donald Trump. Donald Trump threatening sanctions, then also saying he can sort of see where Putin is coming from and why he is pummeling Ukraine. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about softer sentences. That's something we've talked about in the last couple of days. And the spy ring, really interesting story about the Bulgarian spy ring in the UK. 6 people convicted now. We'll see what their sentences are. Very interesting. We'll get into all of that with the doyen of political, I should say diplomatic commentary, Mary Dejevsky, a little bit later in the programme as well. On Reform UK, we've got 2 of the best commentators on this. You're going to want to hear what they have to say. Gawain Tyler, he's a former advisor to Nigel Farage, has known him for years and years, and also Michael Crick, the long-serving political correspondent who is the biographer of Nigel Farage. He wrote a book called One Party After Another. We also got Mike Tapp, the Labour politician, the Labour MP, live in the studio for the next 15 minutes. If you've got any questions you want me to ask him, text them in or tweet them or whatever you want to do. There are lots of ways to get in touch, and this is my show, but it's your show too, and I want to make sure that you get on the air as much as possible, that we get as many callers on the air between now and 12:30. So give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. You can text me, 87222, with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, and remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send me a voice note on WhatsApp, less than a minute please, just send them through, we'll play them out. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number, and you can give me a ring on the main number, 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 12:30. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Mike Tapp is the MP for Dover and Deal, and he is here in the studio this morning. Mike, thanks for coming in.
Pleasure. Great to be here.
It's a really, really busy political day. I want to talk about Reform UK in a second. I want to talk about Keir Starmer and the spring statement that's coming up for Rachel Reeves. But I just wonder how you assess things in regard to Ukraine, Russia and Trump, how you think that Keir Starmer can perhaps be played in. He says he wants to be a bit of a bridge. Do we even really know what diplomatically is going on? Because things change all the time. There were seemingly contradictory statements from Trump yesterday talking about, for example, sort of seeing where Russia was coming from, but also then threatening sanctions as well if he didn't get his way. We know in Saudi Arabia there are going to be more talks on Tuesday. What's your assessment of the situation, particularly where Britain plays into this?
Yeah, it seems to change the dynamic day in, day out, doesn't it? But these are really delicate moments for the country, for Europe, and actually for the world. And what we're seeing from Keir Starmer is playing that honest broker and that bridge. And look, the fact that Donald Trump and Zelensky, after their famous or infamous falling out in the White House, are talking again.
Hard to believe it was only a week ago.
Right, exactly. And you know, that may well be in large part down to this really delicate diplomatic effort that we're seeing from Keir Starmer, who's leading as a true statesman. You know, he's really demonstrating those British values of decency, moral courage, and that statesmanship which we really need on the global stage at the moment.
It's really interesting because the path of international diplomacy has rarely been more difficult, and it seems that Keir Starmer is winning, certainly in terms, you talked about him as a statesman there. Some of our viewers and listeners may disagree, but I think that certainly he is being lauded for his role on the international stage. I wonder at home, things just seem to be much more difficult, certainly with the finances. The spring statement is coming up, major a fiscal event. It usually isn't, it's usually the lesser of the two in regard to the budget, but we know that Rachel Reeves, your colleague, is going to have to make some seriously difficult decisions. ITV News is reporting on how welfare could be cut, more than £6 billion in savings, most of it from toughening acceptance criteria for personal independence payments. I know as a constituency MP that's something that's going to be coming up time and again in your surgeries. Is cutting the welfare budget the right way to get the finances back on track, do you think?
Well, look, we've seen far too many people who are actually trapped in that welfare net. I don't like the phrase sort of welfare net because it does imply people are trapped, and many are. And we've seen that bill go up significantly since COVID, and we're looking at £70 billion over the next 5 years on those who may be able to get into work. And this culture around assessing people's disabilities rather than looking at what they're able to do. And there's many people who are trapped out of work, who want to be in work and who should be in work, and that's where we need to be moving forward.
Mike, I always give the example of my best friend has MS. She is someone who's a really intelligent person. She some days she wakes up and she just can't do anything. She is feeling so unwell. It's a progressive condition, as you know. The next day she wakes up, she can maybe do 4 or 5 hours work. Then the next day she can do a full day's work, and then the next day she's not well again. I just wonder, there's so much flexibility in work, and actually something like a 0 hours contract would actually help my friend, but that's something that Labour has railed against in many regards. Do they need to be more flexible? Does your party need to be more flexible?
The welfare system certainly needs to be looked at again and addressed so that it's morally fit for purpose, but also economically fit for purpose, and that's what I expect to see going forward, so we can get more people into work, treat them with dignity, but of course with a Labour Party, so those that need that benefit because of disabilities will be helped and receive that.
Tell me a bit about the big story in Westminster at the moment, and certainly a lot of our viewers and listeners are Reform supporters, or some of them are members of Reform UK as well. This is a major crisis for them. Rupert Lowe, one of their MPs, involved in more than a war of words. I mean, there's some serious allegations against him, which he denies. What do you make of this?
Well, I don't want to get sucked into their internal disputes, but what I will say really clearly is that Nigel Farage is no patriot. He's spent decades wrapping himself in the flag, but doesn't love Britain. He doesn't love working people. And you've just got to look at Reform's voting record. They voted against the employment bill. They voted against the renters bill. They voted against our asylum bill, which will bring in counter-terror powers to take on the smuggling gangs. And Reform want people to pay for their healthcare. All of those things are anti-British, and they don't stand up for working people.
They say they want, and I clarified this with Richard Tice, they say they want healthcare to be free at the point of use, and they say that Labour is not telling the truth on this.
Well, this isn't what the leader has said. and I know they're currently battling that out, but the fact is they're disunited when it comes to the party, but at the same time they seem quite confused as to what they stand for people in the United Kingdom. And we've seen Nigel Farage fawning over Putin. We don't need that in the House of Commons. We should never have that in Parliament, and politicians must love the country rather than use the flag to their own ends.
Does Keir Starmer love this country? Is he
Absolutely.
patriotic?
Without doubt, and we've seen that.
I mean, a lot of people see, and a lot of our viewers and listeners can be very frustrated at the fact that, you know, there's a lot about international aid. I know that's been reduced. I know that's fair enough. But there's a lot of things that Keir Starmer does that seem to benefit people from other countries. For example, Ukraine, which, you know, I'm sure you think we should stand beside and all the rest of it.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people feel that there just isn't the fairness, there isn't the focus on people in this country. What would you say to that?
No, there certainly is. We look at the employment bill, the renters bill, also fixing the economy and laying those foundations for growth, which of course will benefit people in the future. And the effort that we're putting into defence will benefit people here directly, because if we see a repeat of the Second World War, that's going to impact every single one of us. Now, I've served the country with the military. Keir Starmer's served the country prior to being a politician, and we're seeing him now on the world stage serving, leading as a statesman and as someone who loves this country.
You're the MP for Dover and Deal.
Yeah.
Labour talks about smashing the gangs. Obviously, immigration and small boats a very, very big issue in your constituency. Really, is there any deterrent to these people coming across? Obviously, it's a perilous journey, but by the time they get to France, they may argue that actually coming across the Channel is the least perilous part of that journey. Illegal immigration, the fact that there are people who are, you know, come to this country, have contributed absolutely nothing, they're put up in hotels, they're given 3 meals a day, and then there are people who, you know, you voted for winter fuel allowances to be taken away from elderly people, for example. Again, do you see the fairness aspect there,
Well,
and how
firstly,
people don't feel that's fair?
the pension's going up by £450 or around that in April. On immigration, look, we inherited open borders from the Conservatives. 300 crossed in 2018, then 150,000 since. So there's no magic wand to fix this, but we're currently putting through the Borders and Asylum Bill, which I'm on the committee for. We're going line by line at the moment. Now, I've worked in counter-terrorism in the past, and the powers that this will give the Border Security Command, the National Crime Agency and the police, and bringing in the likes of MI5, means that we can get to the smuggling gangs before they launch, just like MI5 do with terrorists. We don't wait for them to commit a terror attack before we go after them. But this is only a part of the answer, of course. It does take time, but we're taking it really seriously.
You say it does take time. I mean, 26,911 migrants have arrived since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. Labour hasn't got a grip of this.
Well, look, we've said from the beginning, I said this to my constituents on the door and the day after the election, that this won't happen overnight. And the fact that the bill is still in committee stage, you know, just demonstrates to the public that our democracy can take some time. So we do have to be patient. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes to take on the smuggling gangs, including, by the way, that work upstream. Importantly, with the French, who the Interior Minister just last week has said that they're looking to change laws around tackling boats in shallow waters.
Are the French pulling their weight? Because, I mean, you'll know this as the MP for Dover and Deal. We're giving them about £500 million a year, and they don't seem to be stopping people coming to this country. They're stopping some of them, but they're not stopping even a majority.
And this is where we've got to work with our international partners, not like the Conservatives did, which was bashing them on Twitter. That's not going to help. You know, Yvette's been out there, our Home Secretary, just last week to speak with them, and that may well mean that, you know, if they're bringing in laws to mean to allow them to tackle boats in shallow waters, that's going to help. We've met with the Germans, who've changed their laws around procurement of kit that could be used to cross. We've met the Iraqis, who are helping us with the organised crime side of things. There's a large-scale effort going on here, which often happens behind the scenes, and in time we will see that bear fruit.
I'm going to ask you a few questions that have come in from people on text. Betty says, please ask Mike Tapp if there are only 350,000 genuine medical benefit claimants in the UK. They're targeting them and probably kids services instead of the millions spent every day on illegal or legal migrations, and anyone claiming who's paid in and is able-bodied. Why does Labour ignore this? Let me know your thoughts on that, Mike.
Well, Labour doesn't ignore people that need to receive benefits, and we've said that the system that we want to create is fairer to help people get into work and, of course, help those that need the benefits.
OK, I'm just getting quite a lot of things coming in here. 1 second. Today is International Women's Day. Can you ask Mike Tapp what is a woman? Says Steve in Milton Keynes.
A woman is what my mum is and what my wife is. I don't get bogged down in this ridiculous debate, to be quite honest. I come from the army. We don't talk about that sort of thing. But look, I know what a woman is. Keir Starmer knows what a woman is. You know what a woman is. We all know what a woman is.
Adult human female?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But of course we treat all people with respect. That doesn't mean that we have to make it into a divisive issue.
Another question for Mike Tapp. Where are these jobs you speak of for the people on welfare to obtain with a disastrous budget? Job losses are at an all-time high, and with the changes coming in April, there are reportedly going to be another 300,000 job losses. So where do you think these people will get a job, says Massimo from Great Bowden. It's interesting actually, because so many small businesses talking to us are saying actually Rachel Reeves' changes in the budget are meaning that, you know, we have an apprentice, maybe a hairdresser apprentice, we want to take them on. Well, that's going to cost another £2,000. How are you going to get growth if that's the case?
Yeah. Look, growth comes from many places, and of course, you know, building houses will lead to growth, and also the work that we're doing on defence will lead to growth. Of course, it does take time, but at the same time, we're seeing
even your own forecast, the Office for Budgetary Responsibility and others, say you're not going to get the 2.5% growth that you want over the course of this Parliament. That's not going to happen.
What we are seeing is investment coming into the country at record high, and we're the second most attractive country to invest in. That sort of thing will lead to jobs and growth also, but it will take time for that to have an impact. But we will see it. I'm really confident of that.
That's Mike Tapp there. He is the Labour MP for Dover and Deal. Unlike many of his party colleagues, he came into the studio, he took every single question we asked him. Thank you, Mike, appreciate that. Have a good weekend. What is your reaction to what Mike Tapp has been saying? 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Charlie Downs and Jonathan Liss on the debate desk next, getting a reaction to that interview with Mike Tapp, and a few other stories as well, including the crisis engulfing Reform UK, a war of words between Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef, the chairman, on one side, and Rupert Lowe, one of their MPs, on the other. He's quite a popular person himself too. Lots to discuss. Let me know what you think. As I say, the number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Relinquished some of his total control. But here we are now, and suddenly Rupert Lowe is sort of suggesting that perhaps he could take over as leader, perhaps he could be a future Prime Minister. And I suspect, I mean, I like Rupert, but I suspect he's been somewhat corrupted by that endorsement by Elon Musk on X, on Twitter, when Elon Musk tweeted, Farage doesn't have what it takes, I like Rupert Lowe.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including this person says, Starmer playing the honest broker, absolute drivel. Starmer can be honest even if his life depended on it, reacting to what Mike Tapp, the MP for Dover and Deal, Labour MP, said there. Quite a lot of comments about Rupert Lowe as well. We'll get to that in a second, I promise. Brian E. says, tell Mike Tapp to find the jobs for all those unemployable people first before the Institute cuts. Another person says, Starmer and Labour hate the UK. This Labour MP should, on your show, is delusional and just parroting the rubbish he is brainwashed with. John says, another texter says, John says, Tapp is talking rubbish, Labour running scared of reform, and so denigrate Farage. In the meantime, Derek Hatton is being pursued for fraud. That is happening, and perhaps they sent his letter in a taxi. You never know. Alex says, I know Mike Tapp will just give a robot answer, but please tell the gentleman a lot of us working class people who swap to reform will only consider coming back to Labour when this net zero pathetic madness stops. Well, listen, we're going to talk a lot about what Mike Tapp talked about. We're on the debate desk. Charlie Downs is here. Great to see you, Charlie, political commentator, and fellow political commentator Jonathan Less. Should just say,
isn't it great to see me too?
Obviously.
Oh, you didn't say that.
I meant it in the plural.
Oh, right, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Should just say, actually, speaking of great to see people, just want to send a big hello and get well soon to one of our debate desk regulars, Matthew Hulbert, who, despite the fact I disagree with him on basically everything, he is a wonderful person and he's having a bit of a rough time at the moment. He's put it on Twitter and not putting anything in the public domain without his consent, and he is very unwell. He's in hospital at the moment, so get well soon, Matthew, and we hope to see you back on the debate desk or for a chat about something else very, very soon when you're out of hospital. So every good wish to Matthew Hulbert. Right then, let's talk about Reform UK, because Simon has been in touch and says, morning Peter, it strikes me that everyone is talking about the politics of this Rupert Lowe controversy and not what he has actually been accused of. You don't have to be Einstein to see that Rupert Lowe has been betrayed by his fellow Reform MPs using spurious allegations that magically appear hours after Rupert's Messiah comment. It seems that what little hope we had of getting our country back has fallen on the sword of Farage's ego. Well, let me just unpack that a little bit just before I go to the debate desk, because extraordinary few days, Rupert Lowe, one of the 5 Reform MPs, gives an interview to the Daily Mail where he talks about the fact that he thinks that Nigel Farage has a Messiah complex and that he's running Reform UK as a protest party and not as a political party that is ready for government. Nigel Farage then hits back. He gives an interview to Harry Cole on this station on Thursday, says that Rupert Lowe and other MPs wouldn't have had, as he put it, a cat's chance in hell of becoming an MP. Dramatically, the next day, then there's a statement from, this was yesterday, statement from Reform UK accusing Rupert Lowe of all sorts of things, including threats of violence against the chairman, Zia Youssef, bullying allegations, saying that he discriminated against someone, talking about their perceived disability. It was a very, very dramatic statement then. Claim and counterclaim. A KC is apparently looking into this. Now, it should be said that Rupert Lowe denies all the allegations against him. He says that he has cooperated with the inquiry. He says there's nothing to see here, and that the KC, the senior barrister involved, is dismayed, in his words, that this has been put in the public domain. There are also questions about why and when the allegations were put in the public domain, and specifically the allegation of violence, or a threat, I should say more accurately, a threat of violence against the party chairman. Well, that was reported to police apparently on Thursday. That was after the Daily Mail interview. This is all very, very murky. Jonathan Less, what do you think?
Well, I think it's fantastically entertaining to see Reform fall apart. This has been a long time coming. Look, when you have a party, and I'll come to the allegations in a second, because obviously that's serious, but what this really is a political squabble by people who think that they are much higher in the political pecking order than they actually are. Look, I'm not denying that Reform is in a very good position in the polls. No one can deny that. But when you look at what they actually have at the moment, the bedrock, they are starting from a position of 5 MPs, most of whom were not MPs before the last election.
None of them were.
So, well, no, apart from Lee Anderson.
Oh, sorry, yes, Lee Anderson,
so
yes.
You have you have sort of, and Farage has obviously been in politics for a long time, but you have a lot of people, well, 3 people, the majority, who are basically who are kind of newcomers to politics, and they each one represents 20% of the parliamentary party. And so you have what they're trying to present themselves as a government in waiting, but actually there are 5 people with sort of, you know, ambitious people with political interests, and the whole thing is falling apart because Reform has been able to capitalise on Labour's sort of shaky start to government, the Conservatives flatlining, and Reform has basically been the recipient of sort of the voters' sort of dissatisfaction and largesse and whatever. But now the scrutiny is going to start focusing on them, because if they really are going to be a government in waiting, as they want to see it, then that comes with a massive degree of scrutiny that so far they have avoided. And so that's when personalities come to the fore, disagreements, arguments, sort of egos particularly, and the whole sort of rubber hits the road. So really the Conservatives, if they're smart about this, are in a great position to capitalise on this, because when people start to look at who Reform are, who the actual people are, who the egos are, you start to see, is this really just, as we've said for a long time in Farage's various vehicles, just another vehicle for Farage and his ego, just like UKIP became, you know, so he took UKIP and made it his own party, then he discarded it and moved on to something else. The Brexit Party was his company, etc. Or is this actually a party in the traditional sense of the word, with different people bringing different inputs, having shares of the power, and actually something that it is not just a one-man cult? So far, it seems like it's a one-man cult, and you have someone like Rupert Lowe, who very conveniently gets reported to the police after he sort of questions Farage. Now, would that have happened today? Would that have happened? I'm not saying, I don't know if these are true, but would Reform have reported one of their other MPs, the police, in similar circumstances, if they hadn't said anything against the leader? I think that's an important question to ask.
The threat of violence, it is an important question to ask. The threat of violence apparently happened, the 2 threats of violence apparently happened in December. They were reported to police on Thursday. That is what we know. I want to play, just before I go to Charlie Downs, I just want to play what Nigel Farage said to Harry Cole. This was on Thursday, and he was interviewed about this. The Daily Mail interview had come out where Rupert Lowe had criticised Farage, saying he had a messiah complex, saying he wasn't interested in anything other than sort of having a protest party, saying it wasn't ready for government. And what's interesting as well, you've got to remember the context of all of this. We're going to get into this with Gawain Tyler, who was an advisor for a long time to Nigel Farage, and also Farage's biographer, Michael Crick. We're going to talk to them. And what's interesting about this as well is that Elon Musk said that Rupert Lowe would be a better leader of Reform UK. We also have the fact that Rupert Lowe has an amazing and wide-reaching Twitter or X reach, far more than Nigel Farage, which is interesting as well. I want to come to Charlie Downs in a second, but I just want to remind ourselves of what Nigel Farage said to my colleague Harry Cole on Thursday.
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any Reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
Wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Charlie.
This whole thing is just so frustrating from my perspective, because I am as you know, a member, a supporter of the party. I'm somebody who looks at Reform UK and thinks, finally, this is something that can break the stranglehold of the two-party system in this country that has driven this country into the ground. And yet now we're seeing this infighting, which is just a bad look for all involved. I mean, I don't know whether there's any truth behind the allegations made towards Rupert Lowe. I mean, I don't know the man well, but I've met him a couple of times, and he's always struck me as a man of integrity. But you know, there's always going to be teething problems with parties.
It's no more than a teething problem.
Well, I mean, maybe you're right. This may well be. I don't know, the problems that this causes may well stick around. I mean, some people are saying that this is good, that this kind of thing is happening now, long before a general election. I somehow think that this is not going to go away, this problem, because Rupert Lowe is an MP. This is what we have to remember.
Well, he's lost the whip now, so he's not a Reform MP anymore.
Yeah, but he's
an
not
independent
going
MP. Yeah,
he's not going anywhere, though. Yeah. And he has as you said, he has an incredibly strong media presence, an incredibly passionate fan base and support base. So it's possible he may well end up being a real thorn in the side of Reform.
Well, it's interesting.
But if I could just very quickly say say, the most frustrating thing for me about this is the fact that the Conservative Party have had to do nothing in order to score this victory. Because you bet Kemi Badenoch are rubbing their hands with glee about all of this.
We haven't said very much about it.
Yeah, but behind closed doors, you
and
just
also
know
when your enemy's making a mistake, don't interrupt them.
They're laughing. And this is what's so frustrating, because I imagine a situation where, for example, Robert Jenrick had won the leadership of the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party were actually offering the electorate something real in terms of policies and, you know, progress. And yet, well, and that didn't happen, obviously. And so in a way, Reform have had an easy ride because the leader of the opposition has been so poor. And that has meant that this infighting has, I think, taken centre stage. Whereas if there had been a real opposition in the Conservative Party, you might have seen a situation where, you know, Reform and the Conservative Party were constantly trying to sort of one-up and outdo each other, and there wouldn't have been time for this kind of nonsensical and petty infighting. Because the thing that I would encourage Reform UK to remember is millions of people out there are relying upon them, because things are not good in this country, right? Things have been on a downward spiral for a long time. Young people like me are looking at the prospects, and they're not good, and so to see this is just demoralising.
Claire says, weren't we hailing Trump as America's Messiah? It's a word, not a hardy word, as Allah in this country has taken as blasphemy. Let's all grow up and stop this over-the-top overreaction to a party that will sail through this blip to victory over a third world mentality Labour regime, says Claire. Tell us what you really think, Claire. Thank you to Dave. He says, Jonathan List dismisses Reform with glee. Can't wait till the next election when Labour will be served the same cool dish the Conservatives got. No doubt he will have the same losing left-wing mantras. So there we are.
I probably will, to be honest.
Losing left-wing mantras, which did, you know, get a 411 MPs just a few months ago. But there we are. Nonetheless, thank you for that comment. We're going to reflect a bit more on Reform, and actually on what Ben Habib said. He gave an absolutely explosive interview to Kevin O'Sullivan as this was all breaking last night. Ben Habib, of course, the former deputy leader of Reform UK. He was unceremoniously booted aside. I'm going to play you a decent chunk of that interview. Actually got 4 clips, and I think I'm probably going to play them all, actually, because Ben Habib said some really, really interesting and pretty explosive things. So we'll reflect on that with Jonathan Liss and Charlie Downs on the debate desk. I want your thoughts on this as well. 0344 499 1000.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Betty says, Peter, I messaged and said reform would fall apart as soon as they tried to normalise and push the pro-Robinson, Tommy Robinson and Ben Habib lunatics out to get the mainstream vote. Reform can never be bigger than Lib Dems by demographic unless they shift to the middle ground, which necessitates a split from some of the less attractive elements, says Betty. Yeah, I mean, we had a very, very interesting interview from Kevin O'Sullivan with Ben Habib yesterday. We'll go back to the debate desk in a second with Jonathan Liss and Charlie Downes, but I actually want to play you all of these clips because Ben Habib was pretty angry. This is what he said about a declaration of war.
Well, that is, I'm afraid, that is a declaration of war on Rupert Lowe. I don't know the circumstances to which they refer, but I am 99% certain it's all trumped-up nonsense. They talk about high qualities of standard in public discourse. Lee Anderson, in response to a perfectly civil tweet from me the other day, absolutely went for me in an ad hominem way on Twitter, which is frankly unforgivable, in my view, for any MP to act that way.
Ben Habib also talked about doing things correctly.
I'm very, very sorry to hear it. The right response from Nigel Farage, from Zia Yousaf and Lee Anderson to Rupert Lowe's absolutely correct criticism would have been to talk to Rupert, embrace his criticism, understand it, and try and address it. The reason Rupert went public is because there is no mechanism privately in the party to be heard by the leader, Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, for all his protestations to the contrary, has not introduce any forms of checks and balances or democratization in the party. He has his lapdogs, who are Zia Yousaf and Lee Anderson. They do his bidding, and they've gone after Rupert Lowe because Rupert Lowe had the courage to speak up. This is a great tragedy, by the way, for Reform UK, a great tragedy, therefore, for the country, because the country needed Reform UK to become the party that would save it from the precipice on which we now stand and which we started this interview on.
That was Ben Habib talking to my colleague Kevin O'Sullivan last night. Ben Habib, the former deputy leader of Reform UK. Clearly he is angry, clearly he has an axe to grind against Nigel Farage, but very, very interesting analysis there. I wonder what you think of it. 0344 499 1000. It was such an extraordinary interview. I actually want to play you a bit more of it. He talked about Reform UK being destroyed. This is what Ben Habib had to say.
I don't know what Zia Yousaf and Lee Anderson think they're doing. I don't know what Nigel thinks he's doing. But ultimately, their actions are going to result in Reform UK being destroyed. And that will be a tragedy, obviously, for Reform UK. It'll be a tragedy for all the people who voted for Reform UK. But the critical point is this. It will be a tragedy for the United Kingdom because we need a party that believes in this country, has the wherewithal to put aside egos, to put aside who it is that Nigel Farage is, messianic or otherwise, and can create a body of people who will speak up unashamedly for what is right to be said for saving the United Kingdom, protecting it, and celebrating that which is British.
And just finally, Ben Habib talked about two of the characters involved with this. Zia Yousaf, who is, of course, the chairman of Reform UK, and Lee Anderson, who is the chief whip. And they put out the joint statement yesterday in regard to Rupert Lowe. So this is just a final thought from Ben Habib talking to Kevin O'Sullivan last night.
Nigel either needs to sack Zia Yousaf and Lee Anderson if they made that decision on their own, or he needs to face up to absolutely poor decision-making in the face of legitimate criticism from Rupert Lowe.
So lots in that. Let's go back to the debate desk with Charlie and Jonathan. Jonathan, first of all, what do you make of what Ben Habib was saying there? Lots of points.
Well, obviously, Ben Habib has his own axe to grind. He's very angry with the way that he was treated by the Reform leadership, so that always has to be taken with a pinch of salt. But yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what he was saying, apart from the nonsense about Reform UK being the saviour of Britain. Obviously, I think that's absolute tripe. But the concept of Reform's leadership is spot on. Farage is an autocrat. He is an authoritarian. He doesn't want to democratise the party because that will reduce his own power over it. And
although he has, in fairness, he's taken it out of the fact that it was a company. He's putting structures in. He's brought in Zia Yousaf as the chairman to make it a election-winning force.
Yeah, when someone dares to sort of criticise him in any way, he gets reported to the police. 3 months after the allegations were first sort of made, it seems, if it was in December, which the timing is suspicious. So, you know, there does seem to be kind of this sort of air of Stalinism around the whole thing.
Stalinism? You think Nigel Farage is a Stalinist, really?
Well, if he's sort of like seeking to purge people who sort of disagree with him, who dissent, I'm obviously using the terms of, you know, with tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But you know, in Farage, I suppose from Farage's perspective, and I wonder what Charlie would think of this. If you're Farage, you might have a good case to make that actually the success of all the parties that you've been in is because of you. UKIP was going nowhere. Farage, obviously, he's an incredibly charismatic politician. I've always said that. Was able to sort of capitalise and, you know, get that sort of widespread popularity. Then he sort of set up a party from nowhere, the Brexit Party, which went on to win the European election in 2019. And then that was ended, and then Reform came along. And for the first couple of years, no one really knew what Reform was about. It was kind of like, you know, what about COVID vaccines or whatever. And then he managed to sort of capitalise on the Conservatives' lack of popularity and make it about sort of migration. And then he sort of turned it into what it is now. That is thanks to Farage, but that doesn't mean he can build a government on it. Absolutely no way.
What do you make of what Jonathan said there?
Well, excuse me. I quite recently had a conversation with somebody who was very close to Corbyn when he was the leader of the Labour Party, and I asked them.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall in that conversation.
I know, right? It was a good conversation, interesting person. And I asked them if you could recommend that, you know, an insurgent right-wing party like Reform, you know, if you could recommend they do anything, what would it be? And he said to me, be even more ruthless, you know, and be even more ruthless than we are. Punish your enemies, reward your friends, because that's really the only path to victory. And that's very interesting, because really politics at bottom is just about friends and enemies. And so there is a case to be made that actually the attitude that Farage is taking to dissent maybe is what's needed, you know, because right-wing politics especially, I think, attracts people who are very kind of individualistically minded. You know, you look at Trump, for example, and we're not dealing with the politics of rules and, you know, and procedures.
Well, he's redefined politics.
Yeah, he is a great man of history in the, you know, in the Carlylean phrase, and that's not a value judgment. That's simply an observation of the way that he operates, which is not, you know, referring to convention and this sort of thing. It's just going basically off of gut instinct. And I would say that we are entering a period of history where we're going to see a far more widespread resurgence of that kind of politics. I mean, Trump is, of course, the forerunner to it, but I think across Europe we're going to see kind of Caesarism on the rise. and so, you know, maybe the way that Farage is behaving.
Sure, they'll make a stab at it.
Yeah, well,
Very good.
maybe the way that Farage is operating with Reform is what's necessary. With that being said, I mean, I'm a big fan of Rupert Lowe, and I think that, you know, I'm not hugely keen on how he's been treated here, because, as I say, you know, I don't know him well, but he strikes me as a man of real character.
But Corbyn had hundreds of MPs that he could have purged if he'd wanted to. Farage has 4 others. If you sort of purge half the parliamentary party, that leaves you with 2.5 MPs. That is not a basis that the public is going to look at you and say, oh yeah, you're a government awaiting. I'm going to put my faith in my entire life in this party.
You're probably right.
I think a really important point that we have to keep making is the one that one of your callers made at the beginning of this section, which is that Reform is not in a position. The polls tell a kind of an irrelevant story, because you don't have proportional representation in this country. You look at where
but still, if you extrapolate the polls, you'd have nearly 200 MPs for Reform.
Look, Reform's vote is never going to be spread evenly or efficiently in the way that Labour's or the Conservatives can be.
Or the Lib Dems,
right. So you're going to have pockets where Reform will do very well, and swathes of the country where no one is ever going to support them. And that is why, if they don't sort of split off this sort of you know, this sort of slightly unpleasant faction that your caller was talking about, I agree, they are never going to get anywhere. And I would argue that Farage himself is the greatest asset and the greatest obstacle, because even though he has his absolute sort of fan base who adore him, there is a firm ceiling to that, and a majority of the country do not like him and will never vote for him.
It's very interesting you mentioned that. Just the comparison to the Lib Dems is fascinating. They got 3.5 million votes and 72 seats. Reform UK got 4.1 million and 5 seats. It's clearly some of this is about vote management, and you love or hate the Lib Dems, they are very good at managing votes. Their ground game is fantastic, and I'm sure Reform UK want to learn from them, and in fact have said, I think Farage has actually said, we need to learn from the Lib Dems on that aspect, perhaps not others. Rob says Ben Habib is just sour grapes because he didn't win a seat. He has a chip on his shoulder.
Fair enough.
Amanda says, morning Peter, Nigel Farage is our Trump. This spat has put Reform UK in the spotlight and is a wake-up call to the party to install discipline and respect for each other. They must put this behind them and bring back good good men like Ben Habib for the good of the country and the party. Ernie says, hi Peter, it's such a shame Rupert Lowe and Farage are falling out. They were both brilliant in the European Parliament, pointing out where Europe was going wrong. I think they should bury the hatchet and stop listening to outsiders who only have one agenda, to try to stop reform from making Britain great again, says Ernie. Well, let's hope they do bury the hatchet and not the ice pick, to continue the Stalinist metaphor. Brad in Cambridge says, Jonathan List is talking nonsense as usual when he says that Reform UK hasn't faced scrutiny before. They have been ignored by the mainstream media and constantly attacked and scrutinised by left-wing commentators. Who might he be thinking of?
Well, I'd say been ignored by the media, therefore hasn't been scrutinised. You're just making my point, surely.
Let's talk a little bit more about reform. We'll take a call on this, and there are a few other things to talk about as well. The small matter of Ukraine and peace talks. Stay with us here on Talk.
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Herbie is in Harrow and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Herbie, great to have you on the programme. You're on with Charlie and Jonathan, as well, our political commentators on the debate desk. What would you like to say about reform?
Good morning, Peter. Well, what I'd like to say about reform is that, yes, we're not going to please everybody, and I thought Rupert's done a big, big mistake by doing this. We need to be united. United we stand, divided we fall.
Are you a member of Reform UK?
I'm a member of Reform, yes, I am. I saw Nigel last weekend. He's a very popular man, and he's trying to get things done right, which is what's happening. We need to get this government out. We don't need to have battles now. You know, we're not going to please everybody. It will take time to get things right. You know, I'll be discussing things with the chairman when I go to the conference on the 28th of this month and tell him a few things I want to tell him, but that be done in private. And we can then hopefully get it sorted out. Yes, we've all got issues. You know, nothing is right. We can't please everybody, Peter. It's not possible.
Thanks for that, Herbie. Just a final thought on this from Jonathan and Charlie, because we're coming back to this with Nigel Farage's biographer, Michael Crick, the journalist, and also we'll have Gawain Tyler, who's been an advisor to Nigel Farage for some time. We'll come back to this in a few minutes' time. But just a final thought, firstly from Charlie, then from Jonathan.
Oh, get it together, lads. You know, there's a country out there that is crying out for leadership, and this infighting is just the last thing we need.
Jonathan?
Look, this is the start of what I presume will be a period of heightened scrutiny for reform, and, you know, if they fall under it, then that will be deserved.
Just a couple of messages. Peter in Flitwick says, in respect of reform problems, what they need to consider is that Farage is not a young man. He likes a pint and a cigarette, so is at risk of acute poor health at any time. I'm sure he'll go on forever, will old Farage. So need strong deputies below him to take over temporarily or permanently. Rupert Lowe is incredibly popular because he is not tainted with Trump association and the Putin comments. Another person, Simon in Devon, says, I like both of your guests. Jonathan was a Corbyn supporter, as was I. I now vote for Reform UK because the Uni Party are doing nothing but managing the decline of the once Great Britain. Would you describe yourself as a Corbynist, Jonathan?
No, I voted for Labour, and I didn't vote personally for Corbyn when I had a vote in the Labour elections, but I supported a lot of his agenda, of course.
And final one here from Mary in County Down. She says this reform psychodrama shows once again the irrelevance and decline of the Tories. For years, the media and Westminster watchers were gripped and eventually sickened and bored by Tory infighting. Now every cough and spit of reform's tumultuous party relationships are dominating the news agenda. Labour, meanwhile, are now looking mature and serious after a shaky start. The Ukraine crisis following Trump's behaviour has handed Starmer a priceless opportunity to look like the calm, responsible, serious leader. Farage, on the other hand, is now embroiled in a stupid, damaging and pointless row. And Kemi, who's that? Irrelevant. Okay.
That's something we can probably all agree on, to be honest.
Let's talk about Ukraine, because Donald Trump has said he's finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine than Russia in attempts to broker peace between the two nations. We know on Tuesday there's going to be further talks in Saudi Arabia. It's interesting, Britain's role in all of this. Where is this? Where does this go? Will peace in Ukraine happen? And what do you think about Russia's sanctions as well, Charlie?
Well, this confirms exactly what I was just saying about the style of politics that Trump represents, which is not kind of international rules-based liberal order type politics. This is just basically a man going off of gut instincts and just making the calls that he thinks are right. Because just last week, of course, we saw him shouting at Zelensky in the Oval Office in quite a historic display of
I was on there when it happened. I was on there when it happened. It was
I mean,
like nothing I've ever seen.
I've never said anything like it either, although admittedly I've been in politics much less time than you, Peter. But
you call me old?
Never. But Trump is a kind of, he is a kind of great man of history, and so it's no surprise to see him last week doing that, but this week saying sanctions on Russia. You know, this because, and this is the way he operates, and it's actually extremely effective. He's so unpredictable, and he will go from one extreme to another and keep his enemies guessing, and indeed his friends for that matter. But I think it works, and actually I think that, you know, I do actually have faith in the Trump administration to bring peace to Europe, and you know, whether sanctions on Russia are the right call, whether taking intelligence away from Ukraine and arms and aid and all the rest of it is the right call, I don't know, because I'm not the President of the United States, but I actually have the faith.
I don't think he knows either.
I have faith that the thing is, I have faith that he does know what he's doing. I have faith that there is a strategy in place.
Before we go to Jonathan on this, who's got a slightly sceptical expression on his face, let's just remind ourselves of what Donald Trump said on Russia and Ukraine. This was yesterday in the Oval Office.
As you know, we're meeting in Saudi Arabia on sometime next week, early. And we're talking, I find that in terms of getting a final settlement, it may be easier dealing with Russia, which is surprising because they have all the cards. I mean, they're bombing the hell out of them right now.
Jonathan, what do you make of both what Charlie said and the slightly more influential President of the United States?
Well, I wish I shared Charlie's optimism and faith in Donald Trump, let's put it that way. Look, I was actually writing my column yesterday for Byline Times, and I was talking about sort of Ukraine and Trump, and I had to sort of edit a line in it because I said that Trump had not offered any condemnation of Russia, and then the news came in that he had just said that Russia, he might sanction Russia if they carry on pounding Ukraine in this way, and so I sort of changed the line to has offered nothing but the mildest condemnation. Let's look at it in terms of actual deed rather than words. What he has done since that disastrous meeting with Zelensky is he's withdrawn military aid to Ukraine and crucially suspended military intelligence, which by some estimations mean that Ukraine's drones are 10 to 15% less effective on the Russian front line. So this is having a material effect, and obviously, if there is a strategy to it, it is to sort of drag Ukraine to the table where they will be presented, presumably with a fait accompli, which involves sort of giving up half their mineral wealth to the United States, naked extortion, where Russia doesn't have to make any concessions whatsoever. Name me a single concession that Trump, Freudian slip, has demanded of Putin. There hasn't been one. All the concessions have been sort of laid.
Although his view, quite clearly, is that Russia have all the cards.
No, Russia doesn't have. Well, they haven't won the war. They have not won the war. Literally, if you remember, after the days after the invasion, they marched up to Kiev. What, to get a picture of the cathedrals? I don't think so. They were trying to take over the country. They were pushed back, and now there's a sort of effectively trench warfare, war of attrition, with sort of 20% of the country in Russian hands. That is not a victory. That is certainly not what Putin was hoping for or expecting when he invaded in February 2022. So this is not a victory. What we have to talk about is what happens next. And look, you have this sort of concrete action, material action that has been done against the Ukrainians. If Trump now decides to actually increase sanctions or tariffs or whatever it is on Russia, then we can talk about whether Russia is being offered sticks. So far, Putin has just been offered carrots. Okay. He's been sort of elevated back to the top table, exactly what he wants, taking Saudi Arabia, everything that he wants.
Tell us what you think of what Jonathan and Charlie have said and what Mike Tapp has been saying earlier, and indeed what President Trump and Ben Habib have been saying. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll take some calls very soon, but I just want to get Charlie's reaction to what Jonathan was saying there. Do you honestly think Russia has won this war? I mean, the fact is they've taken over only a fifth of Ukrainian territory, and as Jonathan was talking about this feint going to Kyiv, I mean, they're bombing, but they're not winning.
Well, I think there's been a sense throughout this war that Russia have not really taken the gloves off, because, I mean, I sort of
Really?
They literally marched to Kyiv. What were they hoping to do there?
But do you really think that if Putin wanted to completely flatten the entirety of Ukraine, he couldn't? I mean, he could if he wanted to. There is a strategy at play here, which is why he hasn't done that. And I think the bringing of Putin in and the elevating of him that you were talking about is exactly part of the strategy I was talking about earlier, where Trump is dealing with Putin on in the same terms, right? They speak each other's language in the way that Biden and co just didn't, because Biden was an embodiment of essentially of the the international rules-based order, whereas Trump is something different. And so
the international rules-based order is quite good, most people would say.
But is it fit for the 21st century? I don't think it is. I don't think that it really works.
What are you saying, that we shouldn't have international law?
Well, international law is a concept that it's spoken about as if it just exists in the abstract, but it has to be enforced by somebody, and that somebody is, of course, the United States. And I'm not keen on a situation where the entire geopolitical system is governed by the United States, because I don't think the United States has the best interests of Europe or indeed the United Kingdom.
That's right. I certainly agree with you on that one.
And so why would we want an international system that's completely presided over by essentially the American foreign policy establishment? That's not desirable. And so actually, this is what's so exciting about the situation we're in now, where Europe is being forced to essentially remilitarize, right? Start thinking more seriously about its own defence.
Well, Brexit is now supporting a European army. I've heard everything now.
Well, not a European army, but I think that
you just said Europe needs to remilitarise. What does that mean?
Well, on an individual country basis, that's
but we need some kind of European NATO, surely.
Definitely not, because again, who would that answer to? Probably Brussels.
How are we talking about security if it's just individual countries duplicating? The whole point of pooling resources, that you don't duplicate resources, and you can have a much stronger sort of military and security capacity as a result.
But the individual the defence and security capacity of each country is what should be growing, because that gives countries.
But then you have to cooperate and pool it, surely.
I mean, pool it is. I mean, that could mean a number of different things. I think pooling resources in general is a good idea, but having a separate standing army that answers to Brussels is
no. I never said that. I never said that, and that's never what.
But who else would it answer to if
was never what a European army meant. Like the whole concept of a European army. I used to work a lot on sort of the EU's foreign and security defence stuff. It would never mean that soldiers in one country were being summoned by some faceless bureaucrats in Brussels to fight an army without the consent of the government, because no government wants that in Europe. It's about pooling resources and capacity building, and we see that now, as you say, America doesn't have our interests. It's a transactional sense. We have to look after our own security.
It seems a shame to stop this conversation, but perhaps it can continue outside the studio. In just a few minutes' time, we're going to speak to Michael Crick, the biographer of Nigel Farage, and Gawain Tyler, who was a long-term advisor to Nigel Farage about the problems in Reform UK. But I just want to say thanks for a very stimulating and interesting conversation this morning on the debate desk from Charlie Downs and from Jonathan Liss, political commentators both. Stay with us here on Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on the far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 11 o'clock. This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. I'm Peter Cardwell. Lots to discuss this Saturday morning. I'm here for the next 90 minutes. Get your call in 0344 499 1000. In a few minutes, we're going to talk to two people who know Nigel Farage back to front. Gawain Tyler, who was his right-hand man for many years, and Michael Crick, the broadcaster and writer who literally wrote the book on Nigel Farage, a masterful biography, I should say, called One Party After Another about Nigel Farage. There is a big problem, scandal, disagreement in Reform UK. They're investigating Rupert Lowe, one of their MPs, after complaints of serious bullying by female employees, which he denies, and indeed allegations that he threatened violence against the chairman of Reform UK, Zia Youssef. So we'll talk about that. This hour, we're also going to talk about Millie Bobby Brown. She is, of course, a celebrity. She was an actress. She was in Stranger Things. And she has made some really, really interesting comments about slamming the press, where she puts it, dissecting my face. She's called out various writers, various journalists for disturbing articles about her body. She says this is bullying. I will not be shamed. She put up a very powerful little video on Instagram this week, and we will play that, and we'll get some reaction from Kim Kelly, who's a commentator. She's a journalist herself, and she used to write very nasty articles about women and then stopped. We'll, of course, take your calls, texts and tweets as well, and we'll talk about Ukraine, Russia, and the spy ring here in Britain with Mary Dejevsky a little bit later on in the programme. So there's loads to come between now and 12:30. So stay with us here on Talk, and remember, if you want to get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at TalkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. The main number does three things. You can send me a voice note on WhatsApp, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Neil has been in touch and says, Cardi P, listening to a military commentator this week on Talk, and according to him, there's already a European command structure under NATO. So if the US doesn't want to play, then NATO Euro kicks in. No need for a Europe army. That's true, Neil. Charlie Downs is showing his ignorance, says this texter. If he thinks Putin hasn't taken off his gloves, he's thrown the kitchen sink at it, and he still can't win. He is weak. Kenny in Edinburgh says, hi Cardi P. Jonathan Less forgot that Ukraine only managed to push Russia back because of the support they have received from, well, everyone, it would seem. Ukraine could never have lasted so long without help, especially from the United States, so they do not have the cards. Trump is right about what he said about Zelensky. On reform as well, Trevor in Harrow says, as a massive reform supporter, I'm a bit sceptical as to what's actually going on. It doesn't pass the sniff test to me. But at the same time, could you pass on a message to Jonathan Less and say, although we have different political opinions, I will always find him very polite. I do miss the days when you could have a sensible debate with opponents. Well, on this show, as you know, we disagree without being disagreeable. And I thought, for two people who are so diametrically opposed on so many political issues, I thought that Charlie Downs and Jonathan Less had a very, very civilised argument there. Right, we'll talk to Gawain Tyler now. We'll talk to Michael Crick in a second. Gawain is a former advisor to Nigel Farage, is there for many, many years by his side. Gawain, thank you for joining me this morning. What do you make of what many would say is a total mess in regard to Reform UK at the moment?
Well, I think the key words are sub and optimal.
Yes.
Yeah, one wouldn't like to be here. Of course not. It's not an attractive position to be in. But we are where we are, and I know that the party takes matters of HR in this way very seriously and will have done so.
I mean, this is not just an HR issue. This is serious. This is not just an HR issue. This is not just a disagreement. This is a fundamental call for a change in policy. We had on direction of Reform UK, Rupert Lowe calling Nigel Farage a messiah. This is what Nigel Farage told Harry Cole on Thursday. Let's remind ourselves of this.
Yeah.
Let's just play the clip of...
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
Wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Rupert Lowe, will he still be a Reform MP by the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I hope so, but he seems to be taking a tone that says he might not accept us, but there you are.
Well, since that interview, Rupert Lowe has denied the allegations against him that have been made in a statement that was put out by Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform UK, and the chief whip, who is Lee Anderson. What do you make of what...
But Peter, the statement said in his office. It wasn't about him. It's about something that happened in his office. So people were rushing to judgment very fast without actually reading the statement.
Okay, so just bring clarity on that for us. Go and explain that for us.
Literally, it said, if you read the statement, it says something that happened in his office. It was not Rupert Lowe.
He's certainly accused of many serious things, including threats of violence against Zia Youssef.
Well, I find odd. I do find that odd. But it is, as I said, the initial claim was something took place in his office.
What do you make of Nigel Farage's comments there, saying that none of the MPs would have been elected without him? I mean, I think that's true, but I wonder what you think.
It's absolutely 100% true. Rupert has been elected twice. Once as an MEP and once as an MP. Neither time would he have been elected if it wasn't for the involvement and leadership of Nigel Farage. Sometimes people get very, very attracted to the positivity they receive online, but one has to remember that Twitter is not the real world. X is not humanity. And if one was to take a photograph of, say, Nigel, a photograph of me, and a photograph of Rupert, and go to a council estate in Hartlepool, they'd only recognise one of those three people. That's just a basic statement of fact. Now, Rupert has many, many talents and many, many abilities. He's good. He's very good at what he does. He's asking a lot of the right questions. But the point he was making in that article, and of course the timelines do matter, and you and I do not know what those timelines are.
One part of the timeline we do know is that the complaint to police, the Metropolitan Police have said, was on Thursday. That was after.
Yeah, and the Casey's letter was on Friday. And when did he speak to Andrew Pearce, the Mail? I do not know, but it was published on Monday. So there's moving plates on that. There really are.
When do you think When do you think this beef started, Gawain? Because we know that Elon Musk, for example, had said that
I do think that Elon Musk stuff is a complete red herring. Nigel is not so fragile as to give a hoot what some chap in America says.
I mean, he's not just some chap in America. He's a very influential person, especially with many Reform UK people. They listen to Elon Musk.
It's not that important. It really isn't. At the time, I remember talking to Nigel, he was delighted that Rupert was getting bigged up as well, because the whole point is, it broadens, it raises all the boats, this stuff.
So Nigel Farage didn't mind when Elon Musk said that Rupert Lowe would be a better leader of Reform UK than he would, and when Rupert Lowe, at that big conference in Birmingham, got a round of applause and a reaction that rivaled that of Nigel Farage. You think that's a red herring, really?
There's quite a lot of people who get rounds of applause and reactions at Reform events. You know what? Last night I got a massive round of applause at a Reform event in Norfolk. They said people give you rounds of applause at conferences. It's not a big deal.
Let's bring in.
And it's delightful and good.
Let's remind
people to be supporting others.
Okay, let's remind ourselves about what one of Nigel Farage's big critics has said. This is Ben Habib in an interview with my colleague Kevin O'Sullivan last night.
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid that is a declaration of war on Rupert Lowe. I don't know the circumstances to which they refer, but I am 99% certain it's all trumped up nonsense. They talk about high qualities of standard in public discourse. Lee Anderson, in response to a perfectly civil tweet from me the other day, absolutely went for me in an ad hominem way on Twitter, which is frankly unforgivable, in my view, for any MP to act that way.
What do you make of Ben Habib's attacks on Nigel Farage on this?
Ben. Look, I loved Ben dearly, but he has been thoroughly enjoying this. He stirs the pot. He's been saying this sort of stuff for a long time, and so of course he's enjoying it in his crepuscular way in that particular video. This is what he's been banging on for an awful long about since he was removed in position. But he couldn't have had that position because he wasn't elected. He has taken, I think, to a certain extent, taken leave of his senses. He is so passionately opposed to Nigel and has attacked him time and time again. So, of course, he's going to use the opportunity to do so. A year ago today, I was in Wellingborough with Ben fighting the by-election on his behalf, working for him. He's a good friend. But I am getting tired of his constant attacks on the party because it does no good. And remember this, 27% of the population, 27% of which are relying on us to do a massive job of restoring our country. And if we keep on doing this sort of thing, we are letting them down. Forget Rupert, forget Nigel. There's millions of people who are relying on us. And this sort of behaviour, this sort of carry-on, lets those people down.
Final question, Gawain. You know Nigel Farage really, really well. What does he do now to try to bring this back and to stop this row distracting from what Reform UK wants to do?
I think he needs to. Well, what does he do? What will he? He will sit there and think. and no doubt conversations will take place between the aggrieved parties, and one hopes that things will move on. Nigel recognises Rupert's many talents, but he also recognises somebody who is very, very impatient, and sometimes a bit more patience is necessary in politics.
Okay, Gawain, thank you. Gawain Tyler there, former advisor to Nigel Farage. Let's bring in Michael Crick, the broadcaster and writer and author as well of the biography of Nigel Farage, One Party After Another. Michael, we know that Nigel Farage can be a divisive character. We know that Rupert Lowe is someone who has very strong opinions. He denies the allegations against him. You told me a few years ago a remarkable statistic, I wonder if you can remember it, about the number of people who were elected as UKIP MPs, who then stayed as UKIP MPs, who actually finished their term as UKIP MPs. And to me, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can remember it, it would be great to actually illustrate the point that Nigel Farage is a big character and often people do fall out with him.
Oh, they fall out with him on just all the time. I mean, I'm reminded of the regular stories we get from Russia of how a leading critic of Putin has been found dead at the bottom of a tall building, having accidentally walked out of a window on the top floor. I mean, this happens regularly in Russia. And we see the same sort of thing happening in Nigel Farage's parties. No, I don't suppose Putin...
Metaphorically.
Metaphorically, yes. I mean, just take three examples. You'll remember the case of Suzanne Evans, who was a very talented leading member of UKIP some years ago. She said she teamed up with Vote Leave rather than the UKIP pro-Brexit campaign. And Farage took against her, and she was suspended for 6 months from the party on what were quite clearly trumped-up charges, and that meant that Suzanne Evans could not stand for election as leader, and the party degenerated into a farce of a succession of totally inadequate leaders. The same, Richard Sucharesky, who dared to stand against Farage for the leadership in 2010. He was smeared and called a BNP supporter. And it goes on and on. I mean, my advice to anybody in one of Farage's parties is, you tangle with Farage at your peril. He doesn't like criticism. And I think in the long term, this does the parties he leads no good, because it actually it weeds out any alternative talent. And the Reform Party is desperately short of talent right now. It's not going to make huge progress unless it can show that it's not a one-man band and that there are other talented people around. And at the moment, I mean, who are the other talented people? I mean, of the 5 MPs, I suppose Rupert Lowe is quite talented. Richard Tice is quite talented. I mean, Lee Anderson is, he's a bit of a laugh, but he's got lots of shortcomings. And the guy McMurdoch, nobody's ever heard of.
Apart from his assault conviction, although there are other strings to his bow, I'm sure. It's interesting in regard to Nigel Farage. I mean, is it not totally reasonable for Nigel Farage to say, hold on a second here, I swooped in at the last minute, we got 5 MPs, we broke through that barrier that he's been trying to break through for so long. He is a very popular person. He connects with people in the UK in a way that very few politicians do. I would say 5 in my lifetime: Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage.
No, I agree with all of that.
People like that. But so surely he can say, well, Farageism works. When I'm here, it works. Therefore, don't criticise me.
It's very dangerous if anybody says, I have been successful in the past, therefore I am always right and you are always wrong and you must do what I say. I mean, that is dictatorship. And quite clearly, Farage is not always right. And indeed, right now, with his ambivalence about Putin, his ambivalence about Ukraine and Zelensky, his slavish support for Trump, I think he is leading Reform into deep trouble. Because he is on, those are causes that are all unpopular in this country. And if he's trying to become the second biggest party or even the governing party, that is not the way to go. So, Farage needs to be brought down to reality. And I think that the events of the last 18 months have perhaps given him a messianic quality. I mean, not just the election, but before that, winning that extraordinary battle with NatWest and Coots, and then appearing on the show in the jungle on ITV.
I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here.
I'm Celebrity, all of that. He just, he obviously believes that he's, he walks on water. Well, he doesn't walk on water. He's an ordinary human being, full of lots of flaws, and he needs to be reminded of this. And I think it's quite right that Rupert Lowe should have done so. Perhaps, to use the word messianic, was going a bit far. But then for Farage to, quite clearly, this investigation is a direct consequence of Lowe's comments. I mean, one of these events is meant to have taken place on the 13th of December. Well, that's 85 days ago. Is it? So in other words, they waited 85 days before it was investigated. No, I think this whole thing is another illustration of the way in which Farage runs his parties and ends up falling out so often with his colleagues. And I'm sorry I can't remember that statistic. I must go away and re-research it.
I tell you what, if it pops into your head, or if it's easy to do, maybe you'd send me a WhatsApp and I'll read it out before the end of the programme. But for the moment, Michael Crick, I really appreciate that. That's Michael Crick, who's a broadcaster and writer. He's literally written the book on Nigel Farage, which is called One Party After Another. I'm going to take some calls on this, including from Georgina in London, just in a second. If you want to get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
She could have turned that into something like the entire world was actually wanting to expect Meghan to do the right thing and pull her head out of her, you know what, and make amends. And at least with her father, you know, this would have been a great opportunity, a special guest on the season premiere, and she can sit there and make her dad one of those rainbow fruit hats or whatever the things. I mean, it looked like a clown's hat, but you know, Dad would have enjoyed that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Georgina is in London and wants to talk about Nigel Farage. She's given me a ring on, as you can too, on 0344 499 1000. Georgina, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Thank you for having me on the programme. I just want to say it is entirely possible that someone can be a showman, and a very good one at that, and be a leader, a great leader of a political party. We've seen that with Donald Trump, and I think that Nigel now has got the enthusiasm from Trump to do that, and he is doing it brilliantly. Listen, there's a few bad apples in the Reform UK basket at the moment, and he's getting it sorted in a very
do you think Rupert Lowe is a bad apple, or is he just someone who disagrees with Nigel Farage and is being purged as a result?
I think that there's only one king who can wear the crown of this party, and I think it is Nigel Farage. He's the one who has been the figurehead of the party from the off, and he has got a fabulous following. But with any political party, Peter, you can only have one leader. You know, it's a case that there's got to be the leader and then the followers. But
surely being a good leader, or part of being a good leader, is being able to take criticism, is being able to have a conversation with someone and say, okay, you don't think things are going in the right way, let's sit down and be adults about this, rather than throwing statements around, suspending people from the party, bringing up allegations from 85 days ago. Listen, there may well be a case to answer, although Rupert Lowe, of course, denies all the allegations against him. But nonetheless, Georgina, surely behind closed doors, having an adult conversation is a better way than this, mud fight in public.
Well, I think what's happened, I think the allegations against Rupert Lowe, I think, have been made a good while ago, but they have come to the fore now. And attack is the best form of defence. And Rupert Lowe has gone to, I think it was the Mail. I don't read
it was the Mail. Yeah.
I think he went to the Mail and put the story out. Now, instead of doing that, the guy should have got together and had a really
he
good
says he did that. He
well,
said in some of his statements he's tried to talk to Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage doesn't listen, according to Rupert Lowe.
Well, he said, she said, this is hearsay, and you've got to be careful.
Okay.
Believe nothing you say and half of what you see. I think there's a lot more gone on than meets the eye.
Okay.
But I do believe that Nigel Farage is the perfect leader for Reform UK. I've not got anything against Rupert Lowe, and I hope that they can sort it out amicably, because it would be fabulous to have those two guys, in Reform UK.
Yeah. Okay, Georgina, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. That was Georgina in London. A couple of voice notes now. I think at least one of them reacting to Mike Tapp, the Labour MP who was on an hour ago. In fact, both of them are. Let's hear from Craig first.
I am absolutely sick to death of hearing that Keir Starmer is a great statesman. He's done that, he's done the other. He's just a two-faced, phony liar. That's all he is. Flippy floppy Starmer. And if anybody starts believing all this BS that he's coming out with, then the people of this country are thicker than what I thought. We need change, and I don't care what's happening in the Reform Party, stick with it, because we are going to have a Reform Party as the next cabinet in 4 years' time. Keep it together, people.
Well, we will see what happens, Craig. Certainly Reform UK are at 25-26%, depending on which polls you look at. If you put all the polls together for the last little while, it's hard to know, but there is, of course, a trend, a consistent trend, certainly after Christmas. And we'll see what happens in the actual poll, the local elections that take place in May, and we'll bring you, of course, full coverage of that here on Talk. Mac has a voice note as well.
Hiya, Peter. I hear Tapp saying that Starmer is very patriotic. That's funny, that. He calls us patriotics far right.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Peter is in Croydon as well and has given me a ring about the Ukraine situation. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, hi.
Unlike Starmer and Macron and his European leaders, I haven't got Trump derangement syndrome. And well, that's fogging their heads as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, I saw it was Sky News by one of their most, one of their best journalists. Yeah, he was talking to a Russian minister, I think, and he said, "All I want to deal with, we want to deal with America.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to deal with Starmer because he's going to put a spanner in the works." You know, they're poking the bear, and it's wrong. They should leave they should leave Putin to Trump and just concentrate on getting Zelensky to the table on Monday to sign this deal. I mean, Zelensky, this is going to be the fourth or fifth attempt. So
you're talking about the minerals deal there.
Absolutely.
But some people are saying that actually Trump is talking about almost capitulating to Russia, and he says anyway they hold all the cards. But he's talking as well about perhaps sanctions. What do you think will happen, Peter?
Well, I mean, Trump's trying to keep. Basically, Trump's playing the good cop, if you like, and then you got Starmer playing the bad cop. You know, he's trying to keep Putin on side.
Okay.
He knows what he's doing. He can handle him. So Europe should keep their bloody well nose out. I'm sorry, Pete, but they should, because they're poking the bear, and they will cause World War III. You know.
Well, let's hope they don't. Peter, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that. We'll take more calls in a minute or two. We'll also talk about Millie Bobby Brown. She is a celebrity. She is an actress in a very, very popular series called Stranger Things. And she says that a lot of journalists, including female journalists, are dissecting my face. She's talked about writers writing disturbing articles about her body. She says it's bullying. We'll think about that, and we'll hear from her Instagram posts as well, and speak to a journalist who herself used to write very, very critical articles of women and their appearance. I want to know your thoughts on this as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks to everybody for getting in touch and all the different stories that we're talking about this morning. I want to talk about something just slightly different at the moment. This is Millie Bobby Brown. Now, you may or may not have heard of her. She's 21 years old. She is an actress. She's been in very successful series such as Enola Holmes. She's been in Stranger Things and something of a household name for maybe the younger generation. But then she's talked about how she's now 21, she's married, and she's, I mean, at the age of 21, honestly, 21, being criticised for ageing so badly. Trolls online saying that she looked 35 because of the way she has aged. She's talked about supporting and uplifting young people, but when it comes down to it, she says it seems a lot easier to just tear them down for clicks. And she specifically called out and criticised a number of journalists. She named them, actually, in a sort of 3.5-minute video. Let's see a little bit of that video now that Millie Bobby Brown posted online.
I want to take a moment to address something that I think is bigger than just me. Something that affects every young woman who grows up under public scrutiny. I think this is very necessary to talk about. I started in the industry when I was 10 years old. I grew up in front of the world, and for some reason, people can't seem to grow up with me. This isn't journalism. This is bullying. The fact that adult writers are spending their time dissecting my face, my body, my choices is disturbing, and the fact that some of these articles are written by women makes it even worse. I refuse to apologize for growing up. I refuse to make myself smaller to fit the unrealistic expectations of people who can't handle seeing a girl become a woman. I will not be shamed for how I look, how I dress, or how I present myself.
She went on to say the fact adult writers are spending their time dissecting my face, my body, my choices is disturbing. And the fact that, well, she said that, we heard her say about the articles being written by women. We always talk about supporting and uplifting young, but when it comes down to it, it seems a lot easier to just tear them down for clicks. Disillusioned people can't handle seeing a girl become a woman on her own terms, not their own. Very, very interesting thoughts on that. And she also said women grow, not sorry about it. Quite a few people supporting her. And I just thought it would be an interesting thing to speak to a writer who in the past had actually written quite dissecting articles and has now sort of changed her ways essentially. And that's Kim Kelly, who's a commentator, also a newsreader for our sister station in Northern Ireland, U105. Kim, thank you for coming on and talking about this. It's not everybody who would sort of front this up. Tell us about what you kind of used to do.
Well, back in sort of 2003 and between 2003 and 2007, I worked for celebrity magazines in London. Now, the ones that I worked for weren't the worst. They were sort of middle of the road. But yeah, I mean, I certainly wrote articles. I wrote articles about things like, let me see, I remember writing an article, the top 10 Rexy people in Great Britain. Rexy meaning a mixture between anorexic and sexy. And that was allegedly a term that had been coined by Kate Moss. I wrote stuff about we're bringing granny backs back, and that was about women who were really thin and they had saggy backs. I didn't only write about women, I wrote about men as well. I criticised men who wore, as we called them, budgie smugglers. You might know them as Speedos. So that was the kind of stuff that we were writing about. We would have written about girls who maybe had a bit of orange peel skin on their legs and that kind of thing. You sort of
and there were those magazines that had sort of what they call circles of shame as well. They would actually
the Hoop of Horror, and the Hoop of Horror was Hate, and the Circle of Shame, I believe, was Now magazine. I didn't write for either of those, but we had something.
But they would actually sort of zoom in on people and circle bits and say, well, there's a bit of a something saggy. I remember actually the front. This was maybe 20 years ago. The front page of one of those magazines. I can't remember which one it was, and they had pictures of some thin women, people like Gwyneth Paltrow, Jennifer Aniston, and literally they had them looking not at their best, specific pictures, and the headline was gaunt, the word gaunt, and it was gaunt, the price you pay for being thin. And I just remember
something I did. Yeah.
And I mean, you did it because it was a job, because it was, did you believe in it?
No, you did it because it was a job. I mean, generally the women who work in those magazines are in their 20s, in their 30s, and it was a very exciting time. You know, you were working in London, you got to go to all the celebrity parties. It was a real moment in time. Don't forget then the backdrop. We still had Page 3. We had lots of magazines like Loaded and, you know, the men's mags. Celebrity magazines were absolutely huge. So you were part of this culture. A lot of the celebrities bought into it as well. People like the late Jade Goody, people like Kerry Katona, they bought into all this too, and they loved to be in those magazines.
Did you ever meet anybody, maybe at one of those parties, did you ever meet a celebrity or interview a celebrity who you'd written a very critical article about, and maybe they'd seen it or maybe they hadn't?
Yes.
And
yes.
what happened?
I remember once getting called out. I got called out on Twitter, as it was then, by Brian McFadden and Kerry Katona, because I'd written something about their marriage, which I believe to be true because I'd got it from a source. And it wasn't actually a terrible thing that I said, but they both ripped into me together. So at least I brought them together for that story during their difficult.
Perhaps one of the rare occasions when that happened.
Yeah, they got ripped into, and I'm a very thick-skinned kind of person. Maybe it's the Northern Ireland thing. You just think whatever. But I do know that this girl who's been called out on social media, it's a journalist who wrote for the Daily Mail called Lydia Hawker, and she's quit her job and she's in bits about this. So
wow. Okay.
So that's not nice either. I don't think. Obviously, she's been accused of bullying, but now she's being bullied. So that's not nice either.
You were talking about what you did a number of years ago, but it doesn't seem that things have changed that much when a 21-year-old woman, when a woman who's 21 years old is being said, "Oh, you look 35 and you're aging badly." I mean, when you haven't aged at all by the time you're 21. You've just become a woman.
It's this sort of undercurrent of ageism, isn't it? It's funny. She looks 35. Imagine, how dare she look 35?
I'd love to look 35, it'd be great.
Well, I would love to be 35, that was a long time ago. But it's this sort of, still we have this. I get it a lot because I'm quite big on social media. I put myself out there, as they call it, and people regularly like to tell me that I'm old. I am old. I'm 51 next week. Like, what's the alternative? Being dead? You know what I mean? This is absolute nonsense. Like, people constantly like to tell me, "You're old," and I'm like, thank you. I don't know what they want me to say.
What do you want me to do? Be less old? Well, tell me, Kim, on a more serious note, I mean, when did you kind of realise, actually, this is not what I want to do with my life, and this is, I mean, do you look back on it and think that was wrong?
It was very much off the time. It was off the time. It's what people did. There was a massive, you know, it was market forces, supply and demand. Eventually, a lot of those magazines, it went out of fashion. And a lot of these magazines, well, it went out of fashion because the celebrities took control through social media. We didn't need those magazines. So the likes of Kerry Katona and Jordan and people like that, they did their own stuff online. So we didn't control their narrative. They did, which is a new thing. So eventually the magazines all began to close down. There's still a few left. I think Heat's still going. A couple of them are still going, but they don't get, I mean, back in my day, we were selling 300,000, 400,000 copies a week. I mean, you don't get anywhere near those numbers now. So they gradually went out of fashion as we all grew up.
Do you feel guilty about that time?
No. It's a simple answer. No, I don't, because everybody was doing it. I mean, it's not the most edifying of jobs, but you were just doing what you were told. You know, it isn't like I said, I think I'll write something really bad about a woman. I was writing bad stuff about men too.
Yeah,
it was
So when Millie Bobby Brown says what she says, when she puts that out there and does this post, I mean, it is a remarkable thing. I don't think I've seen something quite like it, specifically mentioning writers as well.
Yeah.
Is this something you think perhaps other celebrities might do as well, taking her example?
Of course, they're all going to do it now. But unfortunately, I don't think that is the right thing to do either. I don't think it's right that now we have this young journalist, Lydia. She's getting death threats. That's not right.
I don't want anybody to get death threats, but surely you've got to stand over your journalism.
I think journalism, it's not journalism, Peter. It's not journalism. Writing fluff about celebrities is not journalism. It's writing. And it's fun, but it's not journalism. Let's not try and dress this up as you being a journalist writing about the 100 Rexy bodies in Britain. You know, that's not journalism.
I wonder what you think specifically about what Millie Bobby Brown is saying. I mean, the fact that she's so young as well and has come out and said that, does her youth and the fact that she was a child star, and of course people are commenting on the fact that she was a child and has now become a woman. Is that part of this argument as well?
Well, unfortunately for Millie Bobby Brown, I just did a quick search of her name now. So they've moved on from slating her appearance to slating her new Netflix show. Unfortunately, celebrities can't win. They put themselves out there. Now, I'm not saying this is right, but this is how people feel. They put themselves out there so people feel that they can have their pound of flesh and they can talk about them. They are all now slating her show. So they're slating her art. I remember having a conversation with somebody, was it Angelina Jolie? That sounds very fancy, doesn't it?
Was I talking to Angelina Jolie? I think I was, yeah.
It was Angelina Jolie. And she said that she didn't care what was written about her unless it was written in the New York Times. And then if it was wrong, she would sue. Because apart from that, she said they can say what they like. It's not credible. So I think a lot of these people have to rise above it. It's a bit like whenever you're getting trolled online, rise above it. It doesn't matter what these people say and think. It doesn't matter what some of these celebrity, TMZ and all those things. Who cares what they think? Who cares? Rise above it.
But maybe the celebrities can rise above it, but certainly this does influence a lot of people and influences young women and young men to try to get the perfect body or to act in a certain way or to do things in a certain way as well.
I'll tell you a million stories. These people do not have perfect bodies. I've seen the pictures before they're edited. They don't have perfect bodies. A lot of celebrities used to call us up and send us in pictures that they had worked on with photographers, and there was a list of about 20 edits that had to be made on these casual walking down the street pictures. These people don't look. We all know about filters. We all know about that kind of thing. Celebrities were using those 20 years ago. Nobody has a perfect body.
Kim, really interesting talking to you. Thank you. That's Kim Kelly there, who's a commentator, also a newsreader at U105, which is our sister station in Northern Ireland. I've been known to appear on it myself from time to time. Mary in Belfast says, in the video clip you played, Millie looked like the young girl she is. Writers on online trolls losing their minds because she put on some makeup and an evening dress. It's International Women's Day today in 2025, and women are still being ripped to pieces for a hairstyle and a few minutes of footage on a red carpet. And well said, Kim, it's not actually journalism, in Mary's opinion. Claire has also been in touch and says, here, Millie Bobby Brown. She's a young woman, a beautiful young woman. Screw the horrors who comment, and also go Cardi P, love your show. Thank you, Claire. Very kind of you to say that. Now, lots to discuss, including on Reform UK. We're going to take more of your calls, texts, tweets, voice notes, smoke signals, telepathic messages, however you want to communicate with us. Let us know. The main number is, of course, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Jenrick was in the Home Office when this was going through the Home Office with internal consultation. Let's be absolutely clear. Yeah. We don't want any form of two-tier justice. That's why Shabana Mahmood's been absolutely clear on this, that she's written to the Sentencing Council asking them to review their position If they don't review their position, we'll be taking action legislatively using the powers that Parliament has, because it's right that the Sentencing Council is independent, but it's also right that decisions on minimum sentences are informed by what Parliament wants.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, police have been called to the Elizabeth Tower in London. You'll know it better as Big Ben. The bell is called Big Ben. But anyway, the Palace of Westminster is being scaled by a clown who is climbing the tower, which houses Big Ben, and videos on social media are showing a barefoot man on a ledge several metres up the Elizabeth Tower. What's he got? He's got a Palestinian flag. Of course he does. Police said they were called to the scene this morning at 7:25. A fire engine has now raised a cherry picker to the same height as the man's position at the tower. We've got reaction to this from Tony, who has sent us a voice note on this. This is what Tony has to say.
On the subject of the gentleman, or the individual, as we'll call him, that has climbed Big Ben this morning, I'm hearing there's up to 9 emergency vehicles being used to watch him sit there while being live on social media with a video stream. Is there any comment from the London Mayor yet? Any comment from Keir Starmer? This just needs to be stopped, full stop. Now, the people of the UK have had enough of this nonsense. I really hope he gets dealt as harsh as a penalty is for what he's doing.
Well, listen, I'd be very surprised if the Prime Minister has been reacting to this, or indeed the Mayor of London. The thing is that when these things happen, the fire services have to do what they've got to do. They've got to get the guy down. It's clearly a ludicrous publicity stunt with his offensive Palestinian flag and his protests. Listen, he's got a right to protest peacefully on the ground. What he doesn't have a right to do is trespass and cause danger to himself and other people. So clearly he should come down and just, you know, get on with his life rather than causing this trouble. It's a very silly thing. It's a very silly stunt, and is of course taking fire engines and fire brigade personnel, firemen and women, away from fighting proper fires, fighting, you know, proper emergencies that they should be going to. So yeah, it's a really stupid and immature thing. Leslie has been in touch and says, I'm a paid up member of Reform UK, and I agree Farage is an excellent campaigner and leader, but I still can't see him as Prime Minister of the UK. Look what happened with Boris Johnson, who failed badly because he was useless at running the country. He never ran a large business, nor has Nigel. I've had my eye on Rupert Lowe for a long time and believe he is better suited for the biggest job in the land. Furthermore, I would cancel my membership of Reform UK if Nigel was serious about allowing Shamima Begum back in the country. Well, I don't think he is. Adam has been in touch from Birmingham. Adam, what do you make of Nigel Farage? It's a big and controversial topic at the moment, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah, Peter. The thing I've noticed, the tweet that Rupert Lowe put out the other day, and the story he put out the other day, calling Nigel messianic. It was
an interview actually with the Daily Mail, but yeah, same point. Yeah,
I would agree with that to a point. I think he's on an ego trip. I saw him a few weeks ago on stage in America, walking around the stage saying, "I'm Britain's next Prime Minister." And then this, you know...
Well, what's wrong with him saying I'm Britain's next Prime Minister? I mean, he's high, very high in the polls, and, you know, he needs to have some sort of level of self-confidence, doesn't he? He needs to say, I'm the guy to sort this out.
Yeah, but he doesn't need to vocalise that at the moment. He needs to work hard and get the part... I'm a member of Reform.
Okay.
My wife's a member of Reform, and we're actually considering cancelling our membership over this, because Rupert Lowe is one of the finest MPs I've ever seen, one of the most honest people I've ever seen. I mean, the man doesn't take a salary. He gives it away to charity. So I don't believe...
I mean, he's in a financial position to do that, Adam, although it is a good thing. He doesn't have to do it, and it's a good thing to do. Adam, I just wonder, what can Nigel Farage do to handle this crisis, to get your confidence back?
Well, to stop the witch hunt against Rupert Lowe. I mean, firstly, it was a couple of women yesterday, and now it's Zia Yusuf. What is the actual story? And end the witch hunt. Rupert has stated on Twitter that he wants to sit down and have dinner with Nigel to sort it out. Maybe he should do that with Nigel. That would help. Sort it out between them. Rupert Lowe should not relieve reform. And to my mind, my wife's mind, and a lot of people's mind that I know, Rupert Lowe is probably the only man that could lead reform and be a Prime Minister. I don't see Nigel Farage as a Prime Minister, and that's the truth. I think he's a bit of an egotist, you know.
Well, listen, it's a very, very interesting topic. If you want to get your voice on the air, just like Adam, and Adam, thank you for your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can also send me a voice note on that, as Neil has on this topic of Reform UK. This is what Neil has to say.
The pure idea of reform being the next government is pure folly. Can you imagine a scenario, jumping forward 4 years, reform gets, let's say, 300 MPs, forms the next government. At that point, they will have had 4/5 MPs in Parliament, but zero experience of any ministerial or shadow ministerial duties. And at that point, they're going to have 295 new incomers into Parliament who don't know the ropes, don't know how the country is run. Do you honestly think that is a possibility? That gives us a good possibility for a good outcome with a reform government in place. Personally, I don't. So I'm glad this is all happening now, and hopefully people realise that reform is a busted flush.
Interesting thoughts there from Neil. I appreciate those, and lots of differing views on this, including on how it should be handled. What do you think, whether you're a Reform UK member, whether you're not, whether you support them, whether you don't support them? We all know who Nigel Farage is. Most people listening and watching to this station, or many people anyway, will know who Rupert Lowe is, and this is a big crisis engulfing Reform UK. It all started on earlier in the week with the Mail interview, an interview in the Daily Mail with Rupert Lowe, where he criticised Nigel Farage, and Nigel Farage reacted to that on Thursday on this show. Rupert Lowe alleged that he was being messianic, that he was running Reform as a protest party, something Nigel Farage denied to my colleague Harry Cole.
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
Wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Rupert Lowe, will he still be a Reform MP by the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I hope so, but he seems to be taking a tone that says he might not accept us, but there you are.
That was Nigel Farage speaking on Thursday on the station to my colleague Harry Cole. Well, Ben Habib is the former deputy leader of Reform UK. He has reacted to this in an exclusive interview with Kevin O'Sullivan last night. This is what Ben Habib had to say about this mess, and it is a mess for Reform UK.
Nigel either needs to sack Zia Yusuf and Lee Anderson if they made that decision on their own, or he needs to face up to absolutely poor decision-making in the face of legitimate criticism from Rupert Lowe.
Ben Habib there. Well, lots to discuss on this. If you want to get your call in by the end of the programme, I'm here till 12:30, 0344 499 1000. Louise has called that number about a different topic. She's in Kent and wants to talk about personal independence payments. Louise, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi. I'm just going to make a quick comment about reform, if I may.
Absolutely.
Just to comment, the fact that your chap came on who was supporting Farage and said, well, you know, Rupert Lowe tried twice to get into Parliament and didn't. Don't forget, Nigel Farage tried 8 times to get into Parliament and didn't. 6 elections and 2 by-elections, but also Rupert Lowe has been the most vocal member of all the MPs in Parliament about UK matters, whereas Farage has just been going to America, supporting Trump, etc. So,
do you think Rupert Lowe would be a better leader of Reform UK?
I think Rupert Lowe is fantastic. He's a new MP, but he is brilliant.
The fact is, Louise, realistically, I know who Rupert Lowe is, you know who Rupert Lowe is, the vast majority of vast majority of people in the country couldn't pick him out of a police lineup. Nigel Farage has the recognition factor, and he did change the fortunes of Reform UK by coming back as leader.
I I agree, but it's all that popular thing, like when he goes, all those things. That's exactly what Boris Johnson was like. Look what happened there, and exactly what Trump's like. We wait to see that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it is a very, very controversial issue. Are you a member of Reform UK, or just
no,
right? Okay.
I was waiting to see what would happen because I suspected something like this might happen.
How do you think?
On the fence with all of this.
Okay.
Watching what's happening, but I want to phone up about Pip.
I know, and do you know what, Louise? Do you know what I'm going to do? I actually have one more question for you about Nigel Farage and reform, if that's okay. But what I promise we'll do is we'll talk now, we'll go to the news, I then need to talk to Mary Dejevsky, and then I promise I'll bring you back on to talk about Pip. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine, yes.
Okay, brilliant. Final question about Nigel Farage. What can he do for you, Louise? What can he do to actually bring this back and to sort out this crisis and perhaps to bring your confidence back? You say you're thinking about this, you may be thinking of voting for the party, joining the party. How do you think Nigel Farage can deal with this as leader? How can he show leadership, maybe even sort this out and bring Rupert Lowe, who you're a big fan of, back into the fold?
I don't know, but my one thing is about this is that this is exactly the reason Ben Habib left, because he was worried about the structure of the party. And I feel at the moment, no, Farage is a bit too big for his boots. I think he ought to take up Rupert Lowe's offer, but I think he ought to be talking to Ben Habib as well, because I think they've got to sort out what they do with the party. Because at the moment, I don't think it's a governable party.
Okay, Louise, thank you. I promise you we'll come back to you before the end of the programme. We will have that discussion about personal independence payments that you want to have, but really interesting thoughts on Reform UK as well. So we will hear from Louise a little bit later and some other callers as well. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Michael, who says you have to hold your guest to account for false statements when you're told there is no such thing as a perfect body. Surely you can point to the Cardi pack as something everyone aspires to. Michael, I think you have your tongue firmly in your cheek. It is less a six-pack than a keg. We're going to, on a more serious note, we're going to talk to Mary Dejevsky, the columnist and former correspondent in Moscow, about Russia, Ukraine and the Bulgarian spy ring as well. Sensational story yesterday. Stay with us here on Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Farage, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has.
Across across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. Thank you for your company. I'm Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss in the next half an hour. We're going to hear from Louise again, I promise, on personal independence payments. We're also going to talk to Mary Dejevsky in just a second about everything that's going on, Russia, Ukraine, and the Bulgarian spy ring here in the UK. How on earth was that allowed to happen? How did it happen? The police did a good job, as did the Crown Prosecution Service, in bringing those 6 people to justice. But what did they actually do? And how did they get away with it for such a long time? We'll talk about Reform UK as well. There are people who want to get their calls in on that. And the number, of course, is 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, and remember, you can send me a voice note on 0344 499 1000 and use that number to send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss in the next half an hour here on Talk. Well, thank you to this person, this texter, who says, I'm beginning to think this whole spat is being blown out of all proportion by those who fear reform. Francis says many are thinking the reform fracas tracks back to Zia Youssef, who is the chairman. Of course, he's often seen as, quite correctly, as Nigel Farage's right-hand man. Departures, and now, since he has joined, plus with his religious heritage, how can they properly deal with predominantly Muslim asylum seekers? Many now say no Zia, bring back Ben Habib and Rupert. Well, I don't think his heritage or his Muslim background has anything to do with how we deal with asylum seekers. I mean, just because you're part of a religion or part of an ethnic group doesn't necessarily mean that you deal with people. I mean, I'm a white man. It doesn't mean I can't, condemn other white men for doing bad things. Susan says, Reform are a new rising party which will go through many changes in its way. Your caller Noel go on about the experienced members of the 2 main parties. Their experience has ruined this country. They are complete unqualified idiots. I'd prefer to have an inexperienced new politician, which is a very interesting thought. Okay, well, let's continue that discussion, but also talk about what is happening in regard to international diplomacy, Russia, Ukraine, and fascinatingly, I actually want to start with the Bulgarian spy ring. 3 Bulgarian nationals found guilty yesterday, bring the total to 6 of a spy ring for Russia, one of the largest foreign intelligence operations in the UK. Mary Dejevsky is with us, columnist, former correspondent in Moscow, in Paris, and right around the world. It's International Women's Day, and Mary is an international woman, no doubt about that. Mary, great to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
Tell us your thoughts on this Bulgarian spy ring. And I mean, they seemed almost amateurish, actually, in terms of what they were up to.
Well, exactly. I am very, very puzzled by this case. I mean, obviously, I've tried to follow it as far as you can from a distance. You just can't spend 3 months of your life in court watching every detail of this. So you're dependent to a large extent on reporting by those who are there. And of course, by the way, I would say that it's being spun by the UK authorities. It's a very appropriate story for today. Here you've got 6 apparently Bulgarian citizens who've been convicted of spying for the Russians, which fits perfectly into the current narrative of wicked Russians threatening UK security. But when you look at what they're actually supposed to have done, and you see the pictures of the operation in, I think, was it a Great Yarmouth guest house?
Yes, a B&B in Great Yarmouth, not yes. What you would. I don't think a Great Yarmouth bed and breakfast is going to be featuring in any James Bond films anytime soon.
No, I mean, maybe it's brilliant disguise, and maybe it was all a highly professional operation. But the impression that you get is that it didn't actually do very much. It was said to have been tracking 2 journalists, one of them, I think, Bulgarian, the other one Russian in exile, who were awkward figures for the Russian authorities. But nothing actually happened to them other than that they were apparently tracked all across Europe. They had all this equipment, but a lot of the equipment looks as though it was as suited to, say, producing counterfeit ID documents, which is an absolute that's a sort of standard thing for people working on the black market under the radar in the UK. That is one of the things that they do, produce false ID documents. You don't have to be a spy for that. You just have to be interested in the money.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Mary, because I mean, it does seem pretty amateurish. Will this be seen as a great victory for the intelligence services and for the police? And what does it say, actually, that the Russians are apparently employing random Bulgarians, including someone who ran a beauty salon? And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with running a beauty salon, but that doesn't say to me, international espionage.
Well, one of the things that it might say, if you wanted it to say that, was that this is one of the perils of EU freedom of movement, that Bulgarian nationals were able to come into the UK, were not really, that what they were doing when they were here was not really of any interest to the authorities, that they could stay here, they could live here, they could open beauty salons or whatever. And at the same time, they could use that as a cover for nefarious activities on behalf of the Russians. That is a case you can make, and you can actually make a case that would say that far from being a brilliant British success, at least at the beginning, it's actually evidence to a degree of some British security failure on the matter of free movement, and specifically those people from Bulgaria, which might be seen as to an extent friendly towards Russia. So that's one thing you could say. It's being presented as a gigantic success, as one of the biggest spy operations in the UK. But you're talking about 6 Bulgarian nationals that we can't actually pin down very clearly what they've done. So, as I say, I think it suits people to present it like this. But actually what they do, maybe we'll never know.
Mary, let's talk to the broader points in terms of what's been happening overnight. At least 20 people killed as Russian strikes hitting several regions of Ukraine, including Donetsk and Kharkiv. 8 residential buildings, an administrative building reportedly damaged in Donetsk. Donald Trump as well says he's strongly considering large-scale sanctions and tariffs on Russia. Do you believe him? Do you think that'll happen? He has imposed them on other countries for trade purposes, but given where things are in regard to the negotiations, do you think that will happen or will be deemed necessary by Donald Trump?
Well, it's very hard to define at this stage, and very hard to read why he was actually making this threat, other than maybe he wants to put some pressure on Russia as well as putting pressure on Ukraine in the hope of getting some peace deal. I mean, that's the only rationale I can see for it. He also seems to have gone back on it quite quickly, so I'm not sure how much credence to give it.
Certainly. And with the talks happening on Tuesday, where do you think what happens and where do they go, do you think?
That is a very interesting question. I mean, we saw the previous round of talks, which were different participants in the Middle East, and we're looking at a set of talks this time that appear to be involving the Ukrainians, but not the Ukrainians in bilateral talks between the US and Russia. So Ukraine is going to be involved, which was a big complaint on the part of the Europeans before. Ukraine is being taken into account, but not in the bilateral relations between Russia and the US. And I think that's actually entirely plausible, because from my perspective, there has to be some arrangement between the Americans and the Russians before you can get any security guarantees for Ukraine at all, because their security is being threatened by Russia. It's not being threatened by anybody else.
Mary, it's interesting as well, just in regard to the Russian position, and Sergei Lavrov saying that troops, even peacekeeping troops in Ukraine, would be seen as NATO troops and would be seen as a declaration of war. I wonder what you make of that. Is this just a negotiating position? Is this just what Lavrov is saying, or is he serious?
Well, I think partly it's a negotiating position, but I also think that it's serious, because I don't see that there's any way that Russia is going to accept peacekeepers from EU countries or NATO countries which Russia would see as interested parties, if not actual direct combatants in Ukraine. Russia's been very clear about this from the beginning of when talks were mooted, and it hasn't changed its position. There has been discussion of whether there might be peacekeepers, or which I think there's something like a reassurance force that might come from outside NATO and outside the EU. And people have been talking about maybe Latin America, maybe some troops from Asia or Africa. And to me, that if you're going to have a peacekeeping force, I think you've got to have one that is not going to be seen by either side as being involved somehow in the conflict.
Is that possible? Is it possible to have such a force? I just wonder, obviously all these things are being discussed at the moment, and I just wonder it's hard to predict how these things go, but what your prediction is for what peace actually might look like.
I mean, I think it's not out of the question that there might be a peacekeeping force, and I don't think it's out of the question that could be under the auspices of the UN, and that it could be troops that are not from the US, not from NATO or EU countries. I think that is not impossible, and I think it's not impossible that Russia might accept that. The question is, I mean, if you have an actual peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, which is, as it were, sponsored by the Americans and by the Europeans, I mean, would you actually need a peacekeeping force? I think that, if you can actually do make an agreement that fends off what Russia would see as what Ukraine would see as a threat, and fends off for Russia what they see as a threat from NATO operating from Ukraine. I don't think that's impossible.
Mary, I just want to read you a message that we've got from Ben in Belfast, who says, Mary Dejevsky, as always, is absolutely on the money. We are being sold a load of badly written fiction about Russian spies, merrily aided and abetted by the ever-gullible mainstream media. If Mary is sceptical, we should all be sceptical. So there we are.
Thank you.
Okay, Mary Dejevsky there. Thank you, Mary, columnist and former correspondent in Moscow. Very, very interesting to talk to her, and indeed talk to you. Susan's been in touch on reform. She says that the new rising party, which will go through many changes in this way, in its way. We'll talk, I promised, to Louise about personal independence payments. We'll do that straight after the break, if she's available on the line. We'll also hopefully talk to John and George before the end of the programme. Plenty of calls. You can add your voice to 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
It's almost as though the rise of reform is not because of Rupert Lowe, but it's also not because of Nigel Farage. It's the vehicle through which people want to express their absolute desire to change politics for good, to have a different kind of politics. And so in that way, I really would like everybody's egos to calm down. I know that the Tories will make hay of this. Why would you? You can't blame them for that. Everyone will make hay of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
As promised, Louise is back on the line. Louise from Kent. We talked about reform about 20 minutes ago. Louise, let's talk personal independence payments, the original reason you rang in to discuss with us.
Yes,
what do you think? What's your view?
Yes, well, just to outline, I trained as a physio in the 70s. I then lost my career because of mental health issues.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Louise.
Yeah, it's fine. The doctors told me it was unlikely that I would ever work again.
Right.
And the culture was, in those early days, that people like me were maintained in the community best as possible. That was it. No expectations, nothing. Now, in the 2004, roughly, the recovery ethos came in, and they suddenly realised people like me did have a value to society. And I went on and managed to get back to work, which is what it destroyed me, being told not to work. But because I hadn't worked for 20 years, I could only go back as a bagpacker at a local supermarket. It's all I got. But I was desperate to go back, and it changed my life, going back to work. Now, because I'd been off for so long, I couldn't cope with working full-time. I just couldn't. It was completely alien to me. Eventually, in order to support that, I went for PIP. Now, when I went for PIP, I had to go
This is the personal independence payment. This is the funding the government gives you.
Yeah. I had to go to a tribunal because I failed every cone. And when I went to the tribunal, I mean, you had to have your diagnosis, you had letters from your doctors, social workers, everybody supporting what was happening with you. You had to show that pretty much that you were engaging with services, that you'd got support and help, social work, support workers, everything else, what you did. And I went to the tribunal and I made my case, and the judge said at the time, she said, no, this is exactly what it's given for. You work very hard to stay well, because I haven't been in hospital again since 2001. And even the DWP person sitting there said, no, this is exactly what PIP is for.
Yeah.
To support people.
So what do you think then, Louise, having gone through this system, what do you think of the fact that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is looking at cuts to various welfare budgets, looking at these kind of payments and thinking, how do we save the money that we need to put in, she thinks, to other aspects of public spending?
Well, I think she's right, but my question would be, where's it all gone wrong? Because I gather now you don't really even need an official diagnosis, letters from doctors or anything. We've seen online influencers who say, come to me, I can get everybody to get PIP, everything else, they work with them to get it. We've seen a huge...
There's even a word for them, Louise. They're called sickfluencers. It's sort of jump through these hoops and get these benefits, which I just think is a very sad thing, is a very sad indictment of things.
Where has that culture changed? Because back in 2019, one of the big problems was people with mental health, they were falling at every hurdle. They weren't getting it. They were really struggling. Whereas now it's gone the other way. This ADHD thing is, I mean, sorry, but I don't see why they've all got PIP because of that. The whole point of PIP was to enable you to live your best life with all your difficulties that you had. And if that helped you to stay in work and everything else, with transport, because that's what it can do, brilliant. It's
unlike you, Louise,
to support you being ill.
Like you, Louise, I would much rather that people were working in some way. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a bagpacker. People are, snobs about those kind of jobs can get in the sea. The point is that it's far better to be on your feet doing something than sitting at home if you can work at all.
And I've done recovery groups where people work. They sit there and they say, right, well, the way to work it is you go and do your half day's working experience, and you come out after an hour saying, it makes me very stressed, I can't do it. So what happens? You go to the job centre and they say, I've been as a co-facilitator in recovery groups where I've listened to people do that.
Yeah, well, that's a real
And
shame
they say,
that people see it that way.
that'll mean you never have to work again.
Yeah.
And that makes their lives worse.
Well, you're right, Louise, and that's a very powerful testimony, and thank you for it. That's Louise in Kent there. I really appreciate you speaking to me on both occasions today, Louise. Thank you. John is in Bradford and wants to talk about Reform UK. John, you're the final caller of mine for today. What would you like to say?
Right, I'm a member of the Reform Party, and I've been for over a year, and I've become very, very disillusioned with them because their administration is just totally inadequate.
Right.
I mean, I applied to stand as a candidate for Reform in July last year.
Was this for a council election? Oh, was this for council elections, or presumably, or?
Yes, in the council. Well,
yep.
Whatever elections that are coming up.
Sure, we're coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they're coming up in Bradford anyway at the moment, but it's the principle of the thing.
Sure.
I've never heard anything since. I've sent 5 emails to them asking them what the situation is. I've not got a reply. I've even sent an email off to Richard Tice, never even got a reply. All you get back from them is, oh, thanks for your input, and that's it. Now, I've persuaded lots of people to vote for the Reform Party, and they said, if you stand, we'll vote for you. The thing that is disillusioned me at the moment is this argument that's going on between the two. Now, nobody likes a split party, so I think the only fair and honest thing to do is for Nigel Farage to step down, have an election, and whoever gets voted in then leads the party.
Do you honestly think that's going to happen? Do you think Nigel Farage is going to step down?
Well, I'm not saying step down. I mean, step aside.
Yeah, step aside and have a leadership election.
Yeah, and have a leadership election.
Okay.
And whoever the members want to lead the party is the person who will lead the party. If Nigel gets voted in, fair enough.
Okay.
If Rupert Lowe gets voted in, fair enough.
Okay.
If Habib gets voted in, fair enough. But then they are representing the membership.
Okay. John, very interesting thoughts there. That's John in Bradford. Final call of the day, thanks to Louise, who's on text. He says, great show, and always listen to what Mary Dejewski says. She's so knowledgeable, but without the ego that sometimes accompanies the journalists in her field, says Louise. Foreign correspondents being egomaniacs. Next you'll be saying presenters have an ego. Thank you to the top team behind the glass who have made the show possible today. Tom Willits has been the producer. Holly Keogh has been the setup producer. Tommy Bateson, the assistant producer. Phil Dave, the technical operator. Nea Saravanchi and Davis Fang, the visual producer. Amin Asadi, the video editor. And Dean Spencer, the weekend editor. And you may notice that Tech Up Dave Rhodes is not on that list. That's because he's unwell at the moment. Dave, we wish you all the very, very best and hope you are back to work very, very soon. Place is not quite the same without you. Stay tuned to Talk. We're going to join our colleagues at Talk Sport for the game day exclusive. Nottingham Forest versus Manchester City, presented by Reshman Chowdhury, with live commentary from the Premier League and the EFL as well. Well, we've covered quite a lot of topics today. We're going to cover even more tomorrow. I am on between 10 and 1. We're going to speak to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, tomorrow, see what he has to say about all sorts of issues, including immigration. Let me know what you think too. Of course, tomorrow, as always, I'll take as many calls, texts and tweets as I can. Voice notes as well, always proving popular. So I'm back tomorrow between 10 and 1 here on Talk. I will hopefully see you then.
To Stu, but here we're ready for a big game. Over to you.
Thank you, Reshman. Welcome to the iconic City Ground in Nottingham by the banks of the...
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
Is England's time. Williams who scores and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball. Slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use by Ukraine.
Only farms over the value of £3 million will be affected by the changes.